The topics for our foundations quite often are pulled from the fabric of what you guys are going through and how our businesses are going. Last time on Monday, I said, hey, if you got any ideas for topics, and 20 minutes after that, Julia just happened to be sitting nearby and she said, hey, you could talk about this at our next meeting. And ironically enough, I also had a conversation with Trevon, who also was in the same boat with this situation. And so I figured, hey, this is a great time to talk about this. All right. So I'm going to deliver this and I want you to keep an open mind. The information that we're going to talk about today is applicable in two separate scenarios. The first one being when you have a listing and you are evaluating the almost inevitable multiple offers that are coming in. Okay. And there's very likely to be multiple offers if you haven't figured that out. Okay. But looking at this from the perspective of the seller and how you need to advise your seller also can help you to glean information about the offer that you need to present, because ultimately you want to put yourself on the other side of this equation so that you can then write an offer that has the highest probability of being accepted. Okay. It is just the law of the way things work. You want to make sure that you're getting as much information as humanly possible to them. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is in the context of a real world scenario, a listing that I put live about a week ago and went binding on 3 days ago. Okay. So these are theoretically real world numbers. As far as you know, they're all real world numbers, but the scenarios are the same. Okay. So here's a couple of approaches to think about. In my particular scenario that we're going to talk about today, I received 8 offers on one property. I had several within hours, and I had 2 that came in after the deadline that I had set. So here's a survey question: if an offer comes in after you've already had a conversation and your client has made a decision, what do you do with those offers?
Present them anyway.
Darn Skippy.
Yep.
Good answer. You present every single offer. It is part of your contractual obligation. You never want a scenario to pass. One of them that I got in was $15,000 under the asking price when we already had offers that were $15,000 over the asking price. I knew darn well he wasn't going to be interested in it, but I presented it to him anyway. And that's what you need. That's what you need to do. You never want to say, well, wait a minute, that offer was from my brother-in-law. I might have wanted to accept that offer. Don't put yourself in that situation. Present every single offer. Okay. Now, how do you present every single offer is another good question. Do you physically forward him every single offer, as in the PDF documents? That's a question.
I would physically, in person, present these offers.
Yes, I agree.
It's a real good idea. Okay. Here's the thought process, and I actually have this conversation with the client typically is, look, if I'm going to send you every one of these offers. Each one of them, if you were to print them out, is 20 to 25, sometimes 30 pages long. I look at this stuff every day, and to me, I can in 30 seconds.
So we can do the volume. Huh? Can I share with you guys?
I'm going to mute you.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, Julia. There you go. I'm going to present to you everyone, but I don't feel like you need to. You don't need to print everyone out because your brain's going to explode. Know this: I'm required to present everything one to you. I'm going to do exactly that. But when we get to the point where it's time to evaluate all the offers that we have on the table, we're going to sit down and we're going to look at them side by side, and we're going to compare apples to apples to get a consistent appearance to everything and try to condense everything down to where you don't have to sort through 300 pieces of paper to figure out which one makes the most sense. Okay. So and sometimes I will put all of the offers in a zip file. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll start showing you some different things about how I go about doing this, and you can evaluate it from whatever perspective you like. Okay, what are y'all looking at? A spreadsheet right now? Are you looking at? Okay, so are you looking at Windows Explorer with folders that say offer?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just my obsessive compulsive order coming into play. But you know, if it helps you with how to organize your folders, your files, your thought processes, I just throw this out to be able to help you. I always keep a client folder. In this case, the gentleman's name is right there. And when an offer comes in, I create a folder, and I label that folder as offer number 1, 2, and I just do it kind of sequentially by the dates that they come in. And this helps me to keep everything organized. And within each folder, I have whatever documents came with that offer, the purchase and sale, and their proof of funds or their pre-approval letter, or whatever the case may be, and sort them and organize them this way. And when I go to send them to my client, I may do something like, you know, selecting all of them, put them in a zip file, and send all of them, just so that you know, he can evaluate them at his leisure. But again, I'm delivering them with the caveat of, they're coming to you. Don't feel like you need to open and study every page to be able to discern the details of them. Okay. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to condense them down into something that starts looking like this. This is a multiple offers spreadsheet. I've labeled it's a net to seller. This is a blank of what it looks like when you start. And the goal here is to put every single one of those offers in a side-by-side appearance, to evaluate 2 different aspects of them. The top half of this is examining what the net financials look like. What is the walk-away number that your client is likely to get on the property, okay? The second part of this, from here down, is more evaluating things like that essentially are the risk factors of each offer. Okay, so how much earnest money? What is the closing date? What's their source of funds? Their due diligence period, financing and appraisal contingencies, things like that. So this is what it looks like blank. All right, and I'm more than willing to share this. I don't hold a patent on this. There are tons of multiple offer spreadsheets out there in the world. All you got to do is Google it. I did it this morning, and I found no less than 3 in about 30 seconds. So you're by no means obligated to use my format. I will freely admit my format, which I've developed over years and added to over time, is maybe a little bit more complex than most, but I'm OCD, so forgive me. All right, so here's what you're looking at. There's some basic information that needs to be filled out in these first 3 columns, okay? And this one up here, you need to enter the annual tax bill and the amount of the tax bill that has been paid already this calendar year. This is used to help determine this proration of tax column right here, okay? So you fill this out up here, and then you also fill out this column C, which is what the sales price that you have listed the home for. You would fill out what your commission rate is. 9 times out of 10, hopefully it's going to be 6. But if it's going to be anything different, you want to change that value right there, and it'll change it all across the spreadsheet. If you know what the seller's mortgage payoff is, which is something that I strongly encourage each one of you to ask, is what is your payoff? You know, do you know roughly what you owe? And then you can frame this entire conversation by subtracting that number out. And this represents almost exactly what their check is going to look like when they walk away from the closing table. Okay. So as you get an offer in, you're going to plug in certain information for each one of the offers, the date that the offer was received. Notice these are offer number 1, 2, 3, and they correlate with my folders that I've put over here. Okay, from an organizational standpoint. You plug in what their sales price is. The spreadsheet automatically calculates the formula for you. There is almost on every closing, there's a post-closing filing fee that's $75. I threw that in there just, is it going to make a big difference? Probably not. Okay. When you plug in, before I go too far, when you plug in the sales price right here, up here in this column, it automatically tells me what the percentage of the list price is. Okay, so how can you use this? You can say, okay, our best offer is 104% of the list price, or look over here, 106.4% of the sales price. And you can compare this with what you see on the absorption analysis report, and you've looked at that when you listed the house and say, well, on average, the homes in this neighborhood are selling for 98% of the list price. You've got an easy reference to be able to look at those numbers right off the bat. Okay. Here is where, if the seller is asking you for closing costs, let's say, for example, this one did $3,000 in closing costs. You put that in there and it automatically subtracts that from the net. It also tells you roughly what the percentage of the earnest money is compared to the sales price. In this case, it's 1.3%. Okay. Did somebody have a question on chat? Gotcha, Pedro. And then you can easily evaluate anything over 1% would be kind of the standard. All right. I'm going to go back and change this so that we can look at real world. All right. So then what you see is what their net is. And you can evaluate that across the board from each one of the offers that you receive in. Here's a little bit of some calculations that I did. This green column compares this number with what the standard list price would be, net delta from the full price asking. Not much. Okay. And then you do that for each one of these offers. All right. Before I go down any further doing offers 2 through 8, let's look at the elements down below. These don't necessarily affect the net in terms of the financials, but they do have a factor in the decision process because they represent the risk factors of each offer. Okay, so here you have the closing date that the client has, or that the buyer is proposing. You have what their earnest money deposit is according to what is in the purchase and sale agreement. In this case, they were only offering $1,000, which is less than 1% of the sales price. That's telling, isn't it? You can see that this one is a cash offer, and I built these little drop downs so you can see cash, conventional, FHA, VA, and USDA. Notice these are pretty much in rank order from highest desirability to the lowest desirability. Okay. You can see in this case, the due diligence that they have proposed is 5 days. And assuming that we would accept this offer today, that the expiration of that would be on the 7th of this month. Okay. This has become very helpful to me in respect to, here's a perfect example. Let's look at this one right here. They have proposed a closing date of 12/21. Well, it's pretty aggressive, 3 weeks. All right. But yet they have also proposed a an appraisal contingency of 16 days, which puts puts the appraisal contingency only 3 days prior to the closing date. All right. Now think about this from your seller's perspective. Your seller, 3 days prior to the closing date, they've got to be basically packed out, moved, vacated the house, cleaned, and moved into their new home. And theoretically, at 11:59, 3 days prior to the closing, they could find out that the house didn't appraise and the client bailed, and the buyer bailed on them. Y'all think that's a problem? I do. Okay. So having these dates, no kidding, right here in front of your face, this is something that a lot of buyers agents don't think about. They're like, oh, I'm going to put an aggressive closing date in there. But I've actually seen offers presented that have the contingency, the appraisal or financing contingency happening after the closing date. That doesn't make any sense. So don't be that agent. All right. And if you get an offer like that, you better counter it, because otherwise you're setting your seller up for failure. All right. So you see that each one of these you would just fill out and you'd pull the information from the purchase and sale agreement. We have the offer expiration date, the time, and the date that it is supposed to expire. This just kind of puts it all in one place so that you can monitor this and make sure you don't let an offer expire. However, this is a seller's market. Should you feel pressured to make a decision before somebody's expiration date? That's a question. I see heads.
No. No.
Yep, heads going east-west. You're absolutely right. So this is a seller's market. If somebody still wants to be in the fight 2 days after their expiration date, 99 times out of 100, that is exactly what they're going to do. So don't think that just because you put an expiration date of tomorrow afternoon that the seller is likely to respond and accept your offer when they're likely to get 10 more. It's just not realistic in this market. Okay. I put in the field of who was the listing agent's or the buyer's agent's name, so that when they call me and go, hey, this is Anna, I wanted to check on the status of our offer, I didn't want to have to go, okay, Anna, which one were you? Offer number 3, offer number 4. I put their name right there so I could quickly reference it and answer their question about where they stood in their in the multiple offer scenario. Okay. Here is a field across the board for special stipulations. Some of these, notice too many. I basically put in here too many. These are all investor offers, and they have their half sheet of their investor special stipulations that I'm not going to retype them. But if there is something like, this one has an appraisal gap coverage, this one has no appraisal, this one had a $10,000 appraisal gap, and they wanted the septic system pumped. This one said they wanted the appliances, and this is an investor rental property. You just put in there whatever makes the most sense to help you differentiate and have that conversation with your client. Here's information on who is the holder of the earnest money and who is the closing attorney, so that you have all that information at your fingertips. And because sometimes that can be a factor in who you decide, which one of these that you would decide also. Okay. I also added something, and this probably goes into the area of being a little bit too complex, but it's helpful for me, is if they are financing, I want to know if they are using, if their financing is for FHA and it's at 3.5% loan to value, or if it's a conventional, if it's 80% loan to value. Okay. So you just simply look at whatever the loan exhibit is and you go, okay, they're doing 80%, and you plug in whatever interest rate they have listed on the financing contingency. And that tells you what their principal and interest monthly payment would be. Okay, and I'm going to tell you how that's valuable. All right, in just a second. All right, so now that you've entered this in, and this is nothing more than a data entry exercise, and I don't even bother thinking about evaluating the offer until I've got them all in. And then I put them in here and I look at them side by side and I go, okay, let's look at the logic flow here. Here is the net to seller, and I highlight, in this case, I've highlighted these three because these are the three that net the most to my client. Okay, we all cool so far? Everything making sense? Okay, I highlighted these three, and then, sorry, then I want to go, okay, now let's look at the other risk factors involved. All right, this one nets them the most. In theory, this would theoretically be the most desirable. However, take a look here. They're closing on the 17th. That's an aggressive time frame. Looky here, FHA. Okay, I've got a cash, I've got a conventional, and I've got an FHA. What do you think is the least desirable of these? FHA, okay? Even though it nets them the most, it also holds the greatest risk for my seller. All right, now let's look at the special step. Even though this is an FHA, they offered a $10,000 appraisal gap. Admirable. I admire their desire and their, I see the goal that they're trying to achieve. However, there's a little thing called an FHA amendatory clause. Hopefully you're familiar with this, but what that amendatory clause is in there, and the VA has the same kind of a thing, and it basically says, regardless of what's written anywhere else in this contract, the seller is not obligated, or the buyer is not obligated to move forward and be punished by the loss of their earnest money if the house does not appraise. Even though they've put this appraisal gap coverage in it, the FHA amendatory clause trumps that. All right. So this, while I admire them putting it in there, it's basically meaningless. Okay. And they ask for a septic pump. I probably would not have put that in there. I would have done that in the amendment to address concerns after we're under contract, because nobody else asked for a septic system service. Okay. So, I presented this to my seller and I said, look, this one nets you the most, but here's my biggest concerns about these is it's an FHA, their appraisal gap means nothing. So he immediately was like, you know what, $4,000 difference between that one and this one is not worth the risk to me. And I said, you're a smart man. All right. So now it came down to these two and which one made the most sense. Okay. The net is within what, $80 of each other, something like that, less than $100. One is cash, one is conventional. Okay. This one's offering $5,880. This one's only offering $4,000 of earnest money. Here with the conventional, you do have financing and appraisal contingencies, and this is the one, remember, that we're pretty aggressive on the dates. Okay, I could have countered and said, you're gonna need to get your appraisal contingency down below 10, 14 days. And that may have been a deal killer because they may not, the blender may not have been able to even do that. All right. But in this case, cash seemed to make the most sense. The net was roughly the same. Why not go with cash? Now, remember we talked about Easy Buy program yesterday in the Wednesday conference. This happened to be a ribbon home offer that was being presented. My client had said, I would love to just sell my home. I value my neighbors. I got along well in that neighborhood. I'd hate to see this go to an investor and I wanted to see it go to somebody that, that was going to be an owner occupy. This was cash. And theoretically, it's coming from an investor, but it was ribbon home, which means there's a human being that is leveraging the programs that are available to them, and they're using Ribbon Home to make their offer stronger. And I value that. I think that's awesome. I think it's admirable. Now, when I did this, I called the Ribbon rep, and I also called the agent that presented this offer. And I said, let's talk about your buyer. Do they have another property to sell? And she was like, no. I said, have you seen their pre-approval letter from whatever lender? Ribbon, the way Ribbon operates is Ribbon will let you close with your own lender, or Ribbon will close and buy the house for cash if you can't do it with your lender in the time frame that you've allowed it. And she said, no, he's intending to buy it with his own lender. I said, okay, would you mind sending me the pre-approval letter? Which she did. I called that lender, got a vote of confidence from them that everything is smooth and copacetic, which made a Ribbon Home offer even more attractive. Okay. And with Ribbon Home, they also had an appraisal gap coverage, which is just something that I knew, because even though he's using his own financing, Ribbon will make up the difference if the cash value comes in less. All right. So in this scenario, this is the one that made the most sense. And ultimately, this is the one that that this particular seller chose. Okay. So now you've seen this and you've evaluated it from the perspective of representing the seller. Now, do you think you can glean something from this when you are presenting an offer? Here's what I'm going to tell you. Where is she? This, I'm just going to tell you some stories here, background behind this. This agent had called me on numerous occasions. She did present, theoretically, in terms of the net, the strongest offer possible, and she, tried to appeal to the heartstrings and said, my buyer is homeless. They're living in a like an efficiency hotel right now, studio hotel. Please help me. I'm like, okay, I'll do what I can, and I'll tell your sob story, but not at the expense of the risk to my client. I have a loyalty to my client, not to your client. All right, so keep that in mind. So even though this was the highest net, she said, what could we do that would be different? I said, well, you're trying to put an offer in with an FHA. If your client has $10,000 to spare to cover an appraisal gap, maybe you should think about changing them and converting them to a conventional with a 5% down, loan to value, maybe a slightly higher interest rate. But in order to make your offer more competitive, wouldn't it make more sense to pitch FHA to the curb and try to go conventional? So when she asked for feedback, that was the feedback I gave her. Okay. So that's something that you can think about if you're trying to work with a client that has one of the less desirable financing sources. You can propose to them, let's change things up. Okay. My guess is this Ribbon Home, they are probably doing conventional, or they're probably doing FHA or VA also, but they've partnered with Ribbon Home and they've presented a cash offer, which basically negates the entire conversation about what loan source they're using. Make sense? What questions do you have?
Only questions.
Did you have a question, Julia?
Could you please send us that spreadsheet or put it up, please?
That was my question. May I please have the spreadsheet?
Yes, I will.
And
I will post it for you. Like I said, it is sometimes unnecessarily complex. I forgot I was going to tell you one other thing about the spreadsheet. All right, and let me just show you, just by way of instructions of how to use this thing. Okay, I mentioned to you down here about about the financing. Notice, I don't know if y'all have ever seen this as kind of advanced Excel spreadsheet. Notice these little plus signs up here. Say you're in the process of negotiating these offers, you've evaluated this offer and you realize both of them are, these two are pretty equal, but you want to counter on some particular point of it. Here is what you can do. Say, for example, this is the one that you want to counter. I'm going to expand this. Now, here's offer number 4. Here is the counter offer to number 4. And this allows me to kind of what if the scenario. Okay, what if they went instead of 245, 250? And I got a broken formula in here somewhere. I need to fix that. But in the meantime, I'm going to get rid of it. So now if I was to look at their original offer was 113 and now their new one would net my client 117. And what if I wanted to change remember this one put the financing contingency very close and I countered this to 10 days and this to 10 days. Now I can see I've got from the 12th to the 21st. That's enough time for my client to my seller to confidently feel like he can move out without knowing that the deal is going to crash and burn. Okay. Now, here's the other part of this. So I entered the 80% and the 3.5, and I now determined that their P&I payment was $880. And now that I've countered up to 250, $5,000 more, I can look at this and I've recalculated this for them. And I've said, okay, here's now I can deliver this counter offer back to the buyer's agent. And I can say, we're countering you at 250. Yeah, that's $5,000 more. But you can inform your buyer that this only changes their payment $17.96 per month. And when you frame it like that, doesn't that make it sound real easy for somebody to accept that offer? Okay. It's like, you know what? $17.96, that's one trip to McDonald's. I can give up one trip to McDonald's in a month to afford the home of my dreams. Okay. So I just did that work ahead of time just for the sole reason of being able to frame that conversation in a way that makes it real easy for the buyer to accept our new counter offer. All right. And when you're not doing this, you don't have to look at this column. You can just minimize it. It's still there. You just have to expand it out like that. And this spreadsheet, by the way, goes all the way out to 14 offers if you ever needed that many. When I started this spreadsheet many years ago, it only had 4 or 5 on it. And in the current seller's market, I've had to add to it because I've gotten as many as 14, 15 offers on a listing property before.
I just got a question.
Yeah.
So what if they counter that counter?
Well, you can then just go in and change the numbers on your counter to what their counter would be, and that makes it real easy to evaluate it in terms of the net again.
So you wouldn't add another column?
Right, that's what I was thinking.
You can, but that makes the formulas that are involved in doing that are already complex enough.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
I
Got
thought
it.
it might be a
It's
little crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's easier to just change the one counter from what you countered back to them to what they countered back to you, and just evaluate it against the original offer. Okay, or you could come out to the right-hand side and enter it in column number 14, offer number 14, and just know that that's the counter offer to the counter offer. Make sense?
All right.
Okay, you're making us laugh with column 14.
Sounds like a
Or
name.
offer number 14. All right, useful tool. It's less, to me, this class is less about the tool and more about the logic process behind evaluating those offers and changing the perspective, putting yourself on the other side of the equation when you're writing an offer, because as new agents, more than likely, your first, second, third deals are not going to be listings. They're more than likely going to be buyer transactions. So you've got to put yourself on the other side of the equation for what's important, what's not important when somebody else is evaluating the offers. All right. And the most important key, and I failed to have mentioned this before now, but the most important key before you ever write an offer, if you are writing an offer and doing so in the blind, i.e. doing so without calling the listing agent and saying, hey, my name is Jay. I am going to be writing an offer for your property at 123 Main Street. Tell me what it is that your buyer or your seller is looking for in an offer. And if you're just doing it in a vacuum without knowing what they're looking for, they may be looking for something that you can deliver. They may be looking for, well, my client, most of the offers that are going to be written the agent is going to assume they want to do a quick closing. These people may have a new construction build that's not going to be ready for 3 months. And you might be able to write an offer that puts them 2 months out and gives them 3 weeks of post-closing possession. And you've just handed it to them on a silver platter. Okay. So you've got to make that contact, make yourself known, make yourself knowledgeable and personable to the listing agent, because the listing agent is going to be able to influence the buyer on who they want to work with. Okay. And I'm telling you folks, I've won bidding wars in the multiple offer scenarios before, simply because I made myself known to the listing agent, made them realize that I'm not an idiot. I'm a human being. I know what I'm doing. I'm doing the best I can for my client by reaching out to them, and I've presented a thorough, complete offer, whereas other people have missing exhibits and things like that. Okay. All right, folks. Taking all your time. In fact, I've gone 10 minutes over. Shame on me. Apologies. All right, everybody. I will, when this video gets posted, I will put the spreadsheet, attach it below in Workplace. All right. Thank y'all.